This is Desm 101. Thanks for tuning in. Let's talk about unpopular gaming opinions. And you probably wonder, why would you want to talk about that? And I think it's important to basically show a contrast between maybe what are popular upheld opinions and offer something different, just to kind of balance it out. Why not? I think it brings some more interesting discussion. And I don't think there's any right or wrong opinion, especially with video games. I think it's a subjective experience. So, each person might have their own interpretation or experience with the game. That doesn't mean it's invalid because someone else said that they don't like it. So, to start off, we're going to talk about TMNT, Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. Yep, the first one on the NES. And it's pretty well known if you've seen my other videos that I'm a pretty big fan of this game. I have quite a history with it. It was one of the first games I played on an NES many years ago. So, and it's commonly held to be known that this is the worst Ninja Turtles game. It's constantly derided and trashed on. And in my other videos, I basically just played it and defended it. And kind of in that tradition, I figured why not make another kind of follow-up video now that I'm trying to do more content related with my opinions or my viewpoints on some things. So just to start off with the backstory of my history with this game, I didn't get the NES when it came out, that first 1985, 1986. I had some friends who were able to get one, and around that time, that Christmas, I think it was 1986, I was trying to get one, and my parents got me one of those mini 2600s, those Ataris, and I got like Mario Brothers on it, and some other common Atari games at the time. And my cousin had an Atari, and I used to go over there and play it all the time. So, I was pretty happy with getting that, but I really wanted an NES. So anyways, another year went by, and then that following Christmas, they did get me an NES. And I remember within like the first couple days after I got it, I went and rented this game from the rental store. And I was just totally blown away by this game. And that was, I think that was the first time I ever rented a game. So me and my friends would trade Atari 2600 games or, let each other borrow them, but we didn't go rent those systems prior to that. But when the NES came out, it was like where I lived, it was rental stores, video stores that have NES games. And so I played this, and I was so floored by it that, I was a huge Ninja Turtles fan, of course, lots of kids were during that time. But I was just beside myself when I played this game, and I returned it to the video rental store when I was done with it, after my rental period, and basically I told my parents that I didn't want to play the NES anymore until I got this game. And my birthday is shortly after Christmas, so it wasn't like I had to wait a long time, but they basically got it for me, of course, because I was just like going crazy. And ever since then, that's probably back around 1988, 1987, I used to just play this game constantly for years. And then I remember, I had a hard time with it. I definitely thought it was a challenging game, but I never thought, oh, this game is awful or this is bad. I liked other games too, though, which people don't really like the Iron Sword game, the Wizards and Warriors Part 2. It was a rare game. What else? In general, I just, I liked some games that aren't always the most popular ones, but all my friends really liked this game too at the time, so it's not like, even Nintendo Power gave really great reviews of it. Nintendo Power isn't exactly the best source for unbiased reviews, but, it was kind of agreed that this was a pretty killer first appearance of the Ninja Turtles on a home system. I remember I also had the Tiger LCD game. It was kind of a funky, long, green shape, but man, that was a pretty cool one to have. It was unique. It didn't look like the Tiger electronic handheld. So, after a while, I never beat it, you know, in the first few years. I think it took me a good, you know, I stopped playing Nintendo for a bit during, like, I don't know, a couple of years after that, in the early 90s. And then I kind of came back and revisited this when I was a little bit older. And then I finally was able to beat it. And it was like a monumental experience, just because it's so challenging. And I'll always remember that time that I was able to beat it. So after that, it was, you know, just a game that I would revisit every now and then. And then later on, I actually was going through a bunch of different periods of my life, kind of in college and stuff, where I got rid of a bunch of old things. I was just kind of trying to get rid of all my materials, and I gave away my NES and all the games and stuff like that. So I didn't like play it for a while, and then found out about emulation. This is like, you know, in the early 2000s, and I started doing a lot of emulation. And then, yeah, and then more of those, you know, videos were coming out later after that, where you would hear people's opinions, and I was really interested in YouTube around that time, at least just watching videos and stuff. So I was like always kind of surprised to hear that about the game, when people were just always like, oh, this is a horrible game, you know, and they're comparing it to the arcade game. And I was like, well, you know, I love the arcade game too, of course, that's a really great game, but you know, they're like completely different games. This is a 2D side-scroller, kind of like Legend of Zelda 2, Adventure of Link. And that, you know, it's another game that people were like, oh, this game is crap and it sucks now. But like back then, it was huge. I knew most of my friends all played that game, and everybody held it in very high regard, you know. So, you know, part of the climate back then was that you played a lot of these 2D side-scrolling platformers, you know. And with the arcade game, I don't really prefer it to this one, in my opinion, because it's kind of repetitive. You just basically use that same A and B at the same time attack, you know, your special move basically. You just spam that for the whole game with jump kicks. And once you've figured that game out, it's kind of like, it's not that challenging. I mean, you can try to do it without using continues and stuff like that. I mean, you know, it's a good game, but I'll burn out on that game way quicker than on this one. I'd rather go round after round and even try to speedrun this game, because there's so many little intricacies, there's so many unique parts to it and things in the game that you kind of figure out the more you play it, and it kind of gives you this really amazing experience each time. It's kind of, you know, every time I get to the end, every time I fight some of these bosses, my heart's racing. And you know, what's wrong with that? What the heck is wrong with being, you know, having a really engaging experience with the game? Is that like, you know, and I was like, people don't like this because it's hard, like, or because it's not like another game in the series? Like, well, do they just want games all to be the same? You know, I love Ninja Turtles 3 too. I think it's an excellent one, but it's just, you know, I own both the carts for all three of those. The only one I don't have is Tournament Fighters. But anyway, yeah, so that was kind of why I even started putting video game videos on YouTube. It's because I saw someone some big YouTuber do a Let's Play on it, and I was like, no, it's not, you know, I was like, it's not that hard. So I uploaded a really crappy video of like my screen with a camera, me playing like the end of the game after the Technodrome and beating it, and then I uploaded another one because I went out and bought like a crappy little USB capture that would do RCA, you know, composite to capture it. But the video looked bad also. So yeah, this is the HD version basically. I'm recording this from the AVS, and I think there are some weird graphical glitches that you'll probably see in here. I don't know if it's related to the firmware that's on there, or I think no, because I don't have extra sprites turned on, but I've seen that there are some weird issues with this version. It's the firmware. It wasn't like the final one, so I need to update that. But yeah, because there's another game, Star Wars, has some weird issues, and I think it's because of the AVS. I don't have problems with it on my other, I like the top loader NES. If I play Star Wars on there, it doesn't have any issues, but if I play it on the AVS, it'll like freeze, or the game will just stop at certain points. Anyway, so yeah, I think I covered the TMNT topic pretty well. what are your opinions? I'm kind of interested what you guys think of TMNT on NES. You know, again, I don't think there's any right or wrong opinions. If you don't like it, if you just think it's poorly made, or you know, if you think it's fun, I'm kind of curious what you think. So moving on, another topic that I wanted to mention is FMV games. Now, it's generally held that most FMV games are garbage and they don't play well and they're not fun. And you know, I kind of agree, actually. I think from a gameplay experience or point of view, in the gameplay department, majority of FMV games, especially from, you know, the retro period, are very poor, right? They lack the kind of like true interactivity that they would always promote on those commercials. And that's the main kind of crux, I think, for my perspective on this topic on FMV is I was always so captivated by, you know, the marketing at the time. And you know, you might think, oh, that's so lame. You're like, you know, are you praising advertising and stuff like that? And I'm not really. I'm saying it was effective in the way that they ran some, you know, Sega especially ran some of these campaigns so well. And you really would, you know, want to be that guy playing the Sega CD, or in those commercials, you know, they just really made you believe that this was the way that gaming was going to go, you know, and they'd show you footage of the games, like there was a boxing game on Sega CD, and in the commercials it looked amazing, you know, it looked like you're playing, like you're controlling an actual video, like you're controlling a movie, something like that. So yeah, you know, during that time, I read a ton of video game magazines like GamePro, EGM. Those were like my favorite ones. I had subscriptions to them and everything. But I didn't really get to get those systems when I was that age. I didn't get a Sega CD. I didn't have a Genesis. I had the NES for a long time, and then later my family split up, and then when my dad remarried, the new family we moved in with, we all kind of got Super NES together, you know, but that was way later. But during this time, I always wanted, you know, when I saw the Sega CD come out, I was like, oh man, that looks so cool. So we had this one friend that did have one, and we got to go over there and play Sewer Shark. And it was shortly after, maybe, you know, just like a year or something after the Sega CD came out. And I was floored by that game. I was like, what? Okay, yeah, this is the future of gaming. I was like, I'm kind of, you know, it's got this certain level of interactivity, and it's got the kind of shooting gallery style of gameplay, which, for the record, I'm a fan of those kind of games. I like shooters or arcade light gun games. We'll talk about that in a little bit. But, you know, the FMV games definitely had this pretty awe-inspiring impression coming from the 8-bit and maybe a little bit of 16-bit generation. Mostly, you know, a lot of arcade games were still like my main draw, and the ancestor to these was, you know, of course, Dragon's Lair and Space Ace, and those were fairly common in arcades at the time. I mean, when I was real young, they had one at the arcade that was in the mall that I went to, and it was like one of those traditional CD style arcades that had like people like smoking in there and you know, weird darkened corners and stuff like that. But they closed it after a while, and so the later arcades didn't actually have that game. But I think there was also Mad Dog McCree. That was another classic arcade game that was FMV based. So, you know, you can kind of see where that tradition started. But yeah, people really don't like them now because of how they play and how they control and stuff like that. And I agree, you know, I even own Dragon's Lair for Sega CD, but I don't play it much. It's really challenging because the timing and having to memorize every single spot, stuff like that, is just it's so difficult. It's so incredibly frustrating too. But to be able to get far in that game, I don't know, it's still really satisfying, and that game still kind of impresses me. I don't know, I just always look at it from that historical perspective. But you know, part of it's nostalgia, and you know, just kind of like I said before, I was really sold on that the presentation for those games, and that idea how it was the future. But yeah, now in other games, like for the 3DO, so I collect for the 3DO, And a lot of those games have these long, drawn-out FMV intros, and they're so boring, and they just bog down the game, basically. Like, if you watch the Need for Speed video that I posted, everything that happens in every beginning of a race, end of race, has to have like an FMV cutscene in there, and that's just obnoxious now. Now I just view that as kind of like, oh, this is it's so obnoxious. Here's a good boss fight with Mecha Turtle, and I actually kind of screwed this up. Normally I would have been able to beat the first guy without losing all of Leo's health, and then yeah, I did really bad here with Raph too. So this is a major like downfall, I guess, of my gameplay on this round. So it's not a perfect gameplay video. I tried to do a few things, keep it interesting, basically avoid spamming the pizza refills, so you can go in and out of buildings and restart levels to make pizza. Like that one right there, it'll respawn. If you grab the pizza and then leave and come back in, you can basically just spam the pizza respawn and refill all your character's health, which helps a lot. But to avoid kind of getting into a slog of doing that, make it more interesting, I decided to just get one and pretend like it wouldn't respawn, just to kind of challenge myself a little bit more. Alright, so the next topic that's unpopular is I like light gun games that you play with a controller. And I know that makes like no sense at all, because if you have a light gun game, you're supposed to play it with a light gun, right? And I like those too. I mean, I'm a huge fan of arcades, and even whenever I go to arcade nowadays, I always put money into those, like Terminator Salvation or an Aliens game, or basically any fun light gun game. And even the ones that are real popular now, where you sit down. I think I've seen Jurassic Park one, or like a pirate themed one that was really cool, and they have loudspeakers, and you sit there, and it's kind of, it's more of like an amusement park style ride, like those earlier Sega arcade games that were like that. So on home consoles, particularly in the 16-bit generation, we saw proliferation of a lot of these light gun games, like Lethal Enforcers. That was kind of like the start of it, and those were primarily meant to be used with the normal light gun, but you could just go ahead and use the controller. And that's kind of where my interest started, was during that time I played Lethal Enforcers on the Super NES, and I loved playing that game with the controller. I thought it was so fun. I couldn't get that far, but still, it's like, I don't know, I just got a kick out of it. It was just like a neat thing, having the arcade game at home and being able to play it in this different way. Of course, there were some other games on NES that were made that way, but I think that they kind of came into their own in the 16-bit generation and going on. So one of my favorite series is the House of the Dead. I absolutely love that game. I think the design is just incredible. I like the really cheesy stuff. And this kind of goes back to the FMV, is that there's a lot of really cheesy, horrible acting and bad writing, B or less B-level movie quality and below that. So I find that really charming. I think that there's something beautiful about that that's missing from games now that have this AAA development cycle, but they feel far more soulless in some ways. Not all games, of course, but there's a lot of them that lack some kind of unique personality. And there's something that's very fascinating about that time period, with light gun games and FMV games. They kind of share that quality, where they're often done in really over the top kind of performances and stuff like that. And House of the Dead's a great example of that super cheesy kind of corny stuff. And it does break you out of the game, but I feel like that's just one of the characteristics from that time period. And like light gun games, I don't know, they're really something else. The other ones I played was the sequel to Lethal Enforcers, the second one on the Sega Genesis. So you're like playing in a Wild West setting. I think it works pretty well as a sequel, and I thought it was a bummer that it didn't come out on the Super Nintendo. Another one is Confidential Mission Force, which is on the Sega Dreamcast. I love that game. And it's basically a spiritual sequel of Virtua Cop. So, and the Virtua Cop series was another one that I rarely ever saw in arcades, but I remember seeing it in magazines a lot, and when the Sega Saturn came out, it was like some of the early stuff that was released for the system, and I always wanted that game. Now I have both of them, and I think they play great. I think there's almost nothing more fun and relaxing than after you've had a long day, come home and put those games on easy setting, give yourself like as many extra continues and energy and everything that you can, and just, you know, crank it out and see how far you can get. Usually I can beat the first one, at least not always the second one, but they're just really fun games. They're not super challenging, they're kind of mindless. You just move the cursor around. But I don't know, I get, especially on HD TVs, I get a kick out of playing them. And people are always real surprised whenever I tell them that I play light gun games and I like playing it with the controller. Like, hey, what's wrong with you? So, and sometimes I think I'm guilty of the just trying to get into things because they're different, right? So I'm one of those people that others call a snob because I won't like something because it's popular, you know. So, and I think I've been kind of guilty of that, you know, where just because everybody likes it and you hear about something everywhere and it's like the most popular thing, for that exact reason I won't get into it, right? I'll just be stubborn, like, no, I don't like it. But then I'll usually find something about it, you know, in addition to that. But you know, things that are already super popular and generally loved by everyone, you know, I generally don't like it. You know, the exception would be something like Michael Jackson, especially in the 80s. I mean, everybody loved Michael, and I still don't have a very critical opinion of him. You know, I don't believe all the horrible stories about him. I think it could be true, but I don't know. I mean, I hope they're not, I guess. I still think he is an incredible figure. I think he probably had a really messed up childhood. Anyway, that's off topic. The next unpopular gaming opinion I wanted to talk about is arcade sticks. So this one's not so, you know, it's not as big of a difference of opinion. I mean, a lot of people grew up with arcade games and like playing with arcade style controls, and that's the way I prefer to do it. So my game room is kind of cluttered with a bunch of arcade sticks, but I think it's the best way to play the games. It's just kind of got that more of a tactile kind of feeling to me. The physical experience of controlling the actual, you know, arcade stick and having the big physical buttons, that's just a more of an immersive experience to me. And it's probably just because I was, you know, raised playing video games in that way. So I mean, the first video game I ever played was Donkey Kong on the old like wood grain Atari 2600. My dad had one, and I was, I don't know, probably 3 or something like that, and he set it up, and I was freaking out. You know, I was like, what the heck is this? And I love toys, of course, and he couldn't get it to work. It must have taken him like 20 minutes or something to get the game to work. It was just corroded or something, like dirty, you know. Cartridge wouldn't work, but I sat there for a few hours playing it, and I'll always remember that. And then, you know, a few years later, he took me to an arcade, and I saw Altered Beast, and I was like, oh my god, what is this? You know, I hadn't seen any of that stuff before, and it was very graphic to me. My parents kept me in a very sheltered childhood, so seeing stuff like that in the arcades when I was young was really mind-blowing, and very influential, and kind of scary, you know. Sometimes I get scared by things in arcade games just because I hadn't seen anything like that before, like animated violence. Like I remember first arcade game I beat was Golden Axe, and I remember I had like $5 in quarters. I didn't go through the whole $5, but I went through quite a few dollars, and you know, at the end the axe falls on Death Adder and like the blood's all coming out. I thought that was so cool. You know, I had to like draw it and try to like remember it in my mind after that, because it was just this really huge deal, being able to see that at the time. And yeah, so now there's not many arcades left. really, especially old school arcades. You'll mostly see more of the amusement style arcades, which are fine, but you know, I think trying to recreate that in the home is pretty awesome. Even if the game wasn't originally intended, you know, for the arcade, or didn't, you know, even the first time you played it was just with a normal controller. Playing with an arcade stick, that's just the best, you know. And I know that, you know, regular controllers are more convenient and a lot easier to maintain and use, and probably play better in a lot of cases. You know, I'm not going to argue with that. I just think I prefer arcade sticks, yeah. So anytime I can get them. And my favorite one right now is probably the Dreamcast. I really like the Dreamcast arcade sticks. Really got the bright green ball top and the buttons. It's got the weird metal gray face on the front. And it's my favorite arcade stick right now. The other one that's good is the Saturn arcade stick. It's not clicky. It doesn't have that kind of micro switch clickiness, but that's a great joystick. Yeah, this part's really tricky. That's an easy place to lose all your lives. You can see I lost Leo a little while ago, which, you know, it happens. I'm just playing kind of stupid there. But you can rescue him in the beginning of the next level. So instead of going back, there's another place I could have rescued him and gone back in this level. But I figured, it's better to track on ahead, keep making progress, and go rescue Leo at the beginning of the next stage. And this boss is just hilarious. It's like a easy, horribly designed boss. I mean, it looks freaking cool. Love the graphics on that. Alright, so the next topic is Nintendo consoles. Now, I am a fan of Nintendo, especially in the 80s, and I own an NES right now. It's actually an AVS, and I do own a top loader, but the main one I play is the AVS. And then I own another clone console. It's like a Retron one or something like that. I don't really use that one very much. And I own a SNES Classic. And then after that, I'm not really interested in collecting, like, for the N64. We had one when I was young. Me and my brothers got one, or my little brother got one as a Christmas present one year, and we all shared it. And I thought, you know, there was definitely some good games on there. Mostly I liked Mario 64, Blast Corps was one I remember. Cruising USA was okay. You know, but after that, I didn't really collect any Nintendo home consoles. I was definitely into their handheld stuff prior. So the Game Boy Advance, I had a couple versions of that over the years. I had the initial one without the backlight, and then I got the Game Boy Advance SP, and then I even got a DS for some time, and now I have a 3DS. I didn't actually hang on to all those, unfortunately. Again, back to what I mentioned before, there was periods of time where I just got rid of my consoles. You know, I regret it now, just kind of stupidly, but I think I was in need for money, I was broke, whatever, you know, hard times. Ended up getting rid of those consoles. So their home consoles were never really, you know, I did play some stuff on the GameCube, and actually my wife got one recently to play the original Animal Crossing, but I didn't really, you know, have much interest in playing a lot of those. You know, that Star Wars game, the Rogue Leader or whatever, that looked pretty good on GameCube, and I did play some of that Metal Gear Twin Snakes. That was an awesome game. I actually played through about that whole thing at my friend's house. But yeah, I particularly with the Wii, kind of with the motion controls, I was really like, oh, this isn't the machine that I'm interested in. And I'm bummed right now because I didn't get a Wii, and I didn't get those exclusive Konami games that were on the, you know, Rebirth games, like Contra Rebirth and Gradius Rebirth. So, you know, I was trying to get one, but it just was not working out. It was too late. I wish I'd kind of known a little bit sooner, or had planned it or whatever, but oh well. Maybe there's some other way to get those games in the future. I'm not going to stress it right now. But yeah, and I think Nintendo does put out some good games, but they kind of, as a customer of their home consoles, they just kind of lost me after the Super Nintendo. I just became totally all about PlayStation for a long time. Alright, here's the Technodrome. Probably the coolest boss in the game, I think. And I was lucky, at least I had these throwing stars here to bring down his health and destroy some of these weapons, which kind of make it a real pain to get through this part if you don't have any special weapons. So yeah, nowadays I'm mostly interested in collecting for the Sega Genesis, definitely for the NES, and of course for the Sega Saturn, Sega CD. So that's basically my perspective on what I want to collect nowadays, is mostly those consoles, you know, Sega, 3DO, some of the lesser known ones, Saturn. And actually that's a really good topic to move into, Sega Saturn. I think it's weird that everybody's kind of thinking, oh, that's a failed console, you know. And I guess it, you know, sales figures wise, you can say that. I'm not going to disagree that it was a massive success, or disagree and say that it was a massive success and everything. But I think that there was an incredible library of titles released for the Sega Saturn, and to just dismiss it as one of the worst consoles is one of the stupidest things. And I'm kind of like sick of people stupidly bashing stuff like that because they read an article or whatever, you know, they didn't bother to even look at the titles that are available on the system. And why, you know, what's the point of bashing stuff for the sake of views or to get attention? I don't know. And that's kind of a bigger point for this video, is just you know, why do I keep making videos on TMNT for NES? Well, because I think it's unfairly bashed, and why not defend it? What's wrong with it? There's another interesting guy on YouTube that defends crappy games, and I think that's some pretty interesting content, you know? I like variety like that. I kind of hate too much of all the same thing, right? There's a lot of videos out there that are almost like echoing the same content over and over and over. Like regurgitated, like when one article comes out and 20 big YouTubers have to do their hot take on it or whatever, you know. That's all fine and dandy, you know, but it's not really affecting me negatively or anything. It's just kind of like, wow, it's just odd that so many people make the same stuff, or all these people have the same opinion about these games, you know. Or I heard on a podcast recently, somebody was like, oh, you know, all the gems have been uncovered, so time to stop making those kind of videos, you know. And I do think there's too many of these like hidden gem videos, but to just tell somebody that, oh, you know, don't ever do that because I'm the authority on that subject and I can tell you that they've all been uncovered or they've all been done to death, or, you know what I mean? It's just like, only my opinion matters and nobody else's. And I don't get that. I don't really understand what this, like, telling people what to do or wanting everybody to make the same type of content out there. Alright, I know it's kind of off topic. But yeah, back to the Nintendo consoles. I just haven't really had much of an interest to buy, like, the Switch. I think it's a cool idea. I definitely like portable gaming that's both, you know, like a home console, but it doesn't appeal to me, you know. And in general, the newest game consoles, I don't really want to buy a console until it's out of production. I'm kind of like a vulture in that way. I'd rather everything die down around it, and then it gets rid of all of this weird stuff like the DLC and having to, you know, figure out what version of the game to buy and all that. It's just, let's see the post-mortem, right? So, and I think that's becoming more of a critical factor now because so many games are completely online based. So that's another unpopular opinion, is I don't really like online gaming. I prefer single player or just local multiplayer experiences where you have someone by you that you're playing with or against. I've just never really been into it. I mean, I guess I've jumped into a few online games. Usually it's been first-person shooters, but the thing that just really turns me off is the level of competition and the expected level of competency from anybody has to, you know, it's always at this very high degree where, you know, you just have to kill or be killed right away. There's no kind of like buffer, or so it's just, it's too competitive. It's too like based on the shit talking and I don't know, none of that appeals to me as a gamer. None of this trying to prove myself in this kind of like online arena or whatever. It's just, I can respect it and I think it's fine. That's not my cup of tea, you know. I haven't played multiple massive multiplayer online games or much anything like that. And I think there's value in the single player experience in particular in that kind of post-mortem context. So what happens to the game when there's no more servers, or does the game just cease to exist if there's no servers, if there's no online mode, or I think that's a viable question. Or how does the game kind of continue to exist without? Oh, so there was my first game over there. I had to use a continue here in the Technodrome, the hardest level. But anyway, so yeah, because I see a lot of, you know, modern or contemporary gaming woes. I watch a lot of these gamers talk about all the microtransactions and DLC, and it's just ridiculous. I don't even know what really to say about it. It just completely turns me off. It's like, it has really nothing to do with any part of gaming that I'm interested in, right? So I'm kind of just into these more casual style hardcore experiences where, you know, an arcade is like that, right? So it's meant for you to come play for a brief moment. You know, if you're good and you can play for a long time. If not, whatever, you'll spend some money or this continues or whatever. But then you're done and you move on to something else. You know, it's kind of like ADD style, but they're just these little bite-sized kind of experiences where you go and you interact. Like even this game, you know, I think I spent about 40 minutes or 50 minutes, something like that, almost an hour. But that's just about the right amount of time for some kind of game experiences that I'm looking for. When I'm sitting there for 3-4 hours at a time, I don't know, it's more difficult for me to keep coming back to it if I'm going to play, if I have to play it in that way. So having those kind of experiences is probably because, you know, growing up in that type of environment in arcades and things like that, those are the experiences that really resonate to me, and these are the games I'm looking for. So to have games that are super devoted to the online modes and the DLC and having to figure out like how to maintain the game for its lifespan, like if it doesn't have like a roadmap outside of production, then it's a whole different beast, you know. And maybe in a lot of ways I haven't come to terms with how to really get there, or how to consolidate some of those things. And it's not my priority. Like a lot of the games that I see coming out for the latest systems aren't really totally drawing me to them. You know, some of the stuff that I really enjoy lately that has a retro feel, like Cuphead, that's an excellent game. I've been playing that one quite a bit. I've been recommending it to people. So, you know, there are definitely some Steam games, like Sonic Mania, there's another one. So that's where I'm the target demographic, you know, retro gamer that grew up playing Sonic, that enjoys those games. And that's exactly what I think can be done more now, right? So Symphony of the Night's a perfect example, I think, of the kind of explorations that games need to have more now, where let's just kind of redo that refinement. Let's take this exact same type of template that we see here. It's the 2D platformer, kind of action-adventure game. Give it more of the Metroidvania depth, where we've got massive expanded levels, and just keep adding in that way. So let's use all the space that we have. You know, of course, make the graphics look good, but they can still be like Cuphead or like a Shovel Knight or something, but give it a massive, expansive map, right? So, and even maybe put parts of it that are randomized or, randomly generated, so that it could have a unique part to some of it each time you play. But why don't we have more of those hybrid kind of gaming experiences, but that still focus on this retro presentation model, right? So I feel like there's a lot more that can be done in that regard that hasn't been explored. Like, imagine like a Super Mario 3 kind of game where it's the same type of heavy refinement to the platforming, but it just expands upon the content itself, right? So it gives it like those e-reader levels, if you've heard of those. Those are some rare Super Mario 3 levels that you could only get through this e-reader add-on that was on the Game Boy Advance. But, I think there's a lot that can be done in that way with all these retro style games. Keep refining them, keep kind of getting further down on kind of that level of gameplay. So this is the worst part of the game here. This is I call it the death corridor. Basically where these space shuttle guys, or these little astronaut dudes, come out with their laser guns and they'll just basically hover right in front of you and keep shooting. They'll take so many hits. I got lucky that I was able to get the boomerangs here. So once you make it past there, it's like a relief, but my health is really down. Here's Shredder, the final boss. And really, he should be easy, but I actually made a mistake here. Yeah, so I should have attacked him there. So pretty much now, once you've lost a turtle in the level, you have to go back, so it's pretty much, you're done. You have to use another continue at that point. So I feel like the rest of the game isn't too bad. It's just once you get here, this part can just really screw with you. So yeah, what's another unpopular opinion in regards to retro gaming? What about Ready Player One? What do you guys think of that movie? Have you seen it? Does it interest you? So, from what I've seen and heard, I haven't read the book or anything. I'm just kind of like, no thanks. And I think it's just because I'm kind of tired of the overkill of retro theme stuff like Stranger Things and I don't know, even Wreck-It Ralph, like that was kind of like the start of it, and I don't think that movie is bad, but it's just kind of like, oh, now everything's got to be, a crossover with your favorite like franchises, and remember this and all these old games, and that's the movie, right? So that's the movie, is just basically, here's a bunch of stuff that you remember from back in the day, but here's a weird story it's thrown into or whatever. So I don't know. I mean, I probably sound like an old fuddy-duddy, but it's just like I feel like the market is getting oversaturated with this nostalgic theme stuff, or like somebody else called it nostalgia porn. And I'm so guilty of being a nostalgic person and overly nostalgic, I'll admit it. But I have a limit to where it's just like, okay, I get it, yeah, I remember all this stuff. Maybe it's because I'm already too interested in retro gaming, and I watch a lot of content that's all about educational stuff related to retro games. So I'm going to say that that's most likely the reason why I see something like that, and I'm like, just get it away from me, because it's kind of like a bastardization of a lot of the things I like. That's how I look at it. And if you don't agree with me, that's fine. I don't think everybody is going to have an opinion like me. I think, again, it's all subjective, in regards to a lot of these, video games and our experiences with it. But that's kind of, that's my hot take on the movie. I probably won't be seeing it. I might rent it. I mean, I love Steven Spielberg. I think he's had some amazing films. That last Indiana Jones was horrible. I don't think he directed it, but oh man. But anyway, this, I think I watched that Super 8 film. I watched some of it. I thought it was okay, and it was similar in the goal, the aim of it was trying to kind of aimed at directly at your nostalgia. So we'll see. I don't know, maybe I'll watch it, and maybe it will be an awesome movie. Could happen. I mean, I've kind of had to eat my own words before. That's fine. I think those are always learning experiences, right? I mean, it's better to admit you're wrong than to deny it. Anyway, so yeah, here's that last corridor again. You can see what a massive pain it is. And as a kid, this is where majority of time my games would always end, just trying to figure this out. So I kind of came to grips with, okay, you have to take out these guys that clutter up behind you, and then you can go ahead and proceed. And Leo, once he loses over half his life, then he can attack it like a double, like two hits is one strike, so he'll kill those helicopter guys. And then I got some more boomerangs. So, normally I love to get boomerangs, especially earlier in the game. You can share them between the Ninja Turtles. But in this run, it was just only wanting to give them to me at the very end. For some reason. So the game's kind of neat like that. It's random. Like the placement of the Technodrome is totally random. And the one that I went to in this one, it's kind of like my lucky spot. But there's random drops and... So this is how you're supposed to do it. Just use Donnie, and he'll get stuck in this pattern. Keep jumping at you. Yep, there you go. Almost. And there you go. That's TMNT on NES. I love that background of the final boss level. It looks super cool. Love the detail. This level, this ending is kind of funny. Splinter turns into a... Alright, well that's going to wrap it up today, guys. Thanks so much for tuning in, and I will see you next time.